This webinar is all about how you apply for Net Good Grants in our 2026 application period. One of the things that we will let you know is that because there are so many people here, we are going to focus on making sure that you get all of the information from us, and then that if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A button, and we will get your questions at the end. If we miss anything, you can always write to us at grants@cira.ca. Take it away, Amanda.
Thank you, Maureen. All right, so what are we going to cover today? Today, we are going to learn all about CIRA and Net Good. We're going to talk about what we fund, what an eligible project has, best ways to prepare your submission, how to use our online grant submission portal, the application review process, so what happens after your grant proposal is submitted, the top mistakes to avoid, and then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So our organization is CIRA, the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, and we're based in Ottawa, Ontario. We're best known for our role managing more than 3 million .ca domains on behalf of all Canadians, but we also offer related cybersecurity projects and services. CIRA's goal is to ensure a trusted internet for all Canadians. As you can see, there's a lot going on. What we're going to focus on today is CIRA Net Good. So CIRA generates revenue through .ca domains and cybersecurity services. And as a not-for-profit corporation, we don't pay shareholders. Instead, we choose to reinvest millions of dollars each year to support communities, projects, and policies that make Canada's internet a better place. We do that through CIRA's Give Back program, Net Good. In addition to grants, we do a lot of things through our Net Good program. All of our community investment is focused through 3 pillars: infrastructure, online safety, and policy engagement. How we invest in infrastructure is we offer the Internet Performance Test, which can be used to test your connection for speed and quality, helping build a public database that communities and decision makers can use to pinpoint gaps and push for better internet. We also support the growth and adoption of Canadian internet exchange points, so more internet traffic stays in Canada, making connectivity faster, cheaper, and more resilient for communities and the organizations that serve them. When it comes to online safety, we offer Canadian Shield, a free cybersecurity service that helps Canadians stay safe online by blocking malware, phishing, scams, and harmful content, all while protecting your privacy. Some of you might already be using it, but if you're not, we do highly recommend that you take some time to download it now at cira.ca/shield. And our contribution to policy engagement is that each year we convene the Canadian Internet Governance Forum, usually in November, which brings together Canada's key internet stakeholders to shape inclusive digital policy priorities, strengthening Canada's voice at home and in the global internet market, in global internet governance. So that's a little bit of background on the rest of CIRA's Net Good investments. And of course, today we're here to focus on Net Good Grants. So grants are our annual funding program. Early each year, we put out a call for applications. Our goal is to fund community-led internet projects that build a resilient, trusted, and secure internet for Canadians, and that work to close Canada's digital divides. Each year, we have over $1 million in funding available, and we can fund up to $100,000 per grant. This will be our 13th year running the program, and since 2014, we've funded 245 projects with $14.2 million. So let's talk about the types of projects we fund and give you some examples in each one. Like with the Net Good program as a whole, the 3 funding areas for our grants are infrastructure, online safety, and policy engagement. To give you an idea of what each funding area means, for our infrastructure projects, CIRA aims to increase the number of Canadians who can access high quality and high performing internet. Through our Net Good grants, we fund community-led connectivity research, network planning, and infrastructure solutions. Connectivity projects must be community-led and owned, contributing to long-term community development. We understand that online safety is essential for everyone to participate online with confidence. That's why we fund projects that build cybersecurity skills and deliver training and tools to help people counter threats like misinformation, exploitation, harassment, surveillance, and online violence. And finally, For policy engagement projects, CIRA works to foster a legislative and public policy environment that supports a trusted internet for Canadians and reflects the voices of diverse stakeholders committed to closing Canada's digital divides. We fund research, convene events, and support advocacy efforts that raise awareness, influence policy, and help build a more inclusive digital landscape for everyone in Canada. What about some real-world examples of the projects that we funded? For infrastructure, we've had the opportunity to help build a solar-powered radio tower to connect a remote BC region to Wi-Fi and cellular service. We've helped to provide free-to-use secure community Wi-Fi in low-income neighborhoods in downtown Ottawa. And we've assisted in deploying upgraded wireless infrastructure that provides access to low Earth orbit technology for remote communities in Nunavut. As a reminder, for our infrastructure projects, we require that the solutions are community-led and owned. A connectivity project where the main provider is a major telecom company like Rogers, Starlink, or Northwestel, for example, would not be eligible. For policy engagement, we have twice now funded the Canadian Youth Internet Governance Forum, a national event to engage youth aged 18 to 30 from across Canada in multi-stakeholder internet governance and policy discussions through panels, workshops, and mentorship opportunities. We've funded a research report on digital equity and internet affordability across low-income communities in Canada. And we've assisted with targeted policy engagement training to empower Indigenous connectivity advocates to directly connect with policymakers. And finally, some examples for online safety. We've worked with a lab for college students in IT to practice detecting and addressing cybersecurity attacks and threats. We've helped youth trained in 3 rural and remote communities to become peer educators and deliver workshops on online exploitation, boundary setting, and respectful digital communication. And finally, we've helped fund training programs for seniors and newcomers to increase online confidence and reduce vulnerability to scams. On our application form, we do ask that applicants describe how their application is uniquely distinct from the projects that CIRA has funded over the last 5 years. You can view a complete list of projects on this page on our website. You can sort projects by year, province, or funding area. Just click on a project to read more and see stories and photos from the completed projects. Also, you can check out our past projects and learn more about the history of our granting program on our history page. There you can view a map, which has markers for each project we funded, so you can see exactly where across Canada we've helped close some digital divides, and you can zoom in to view everything. Click on a marker to learn more about the project. Now I'm going to pass it back over to Maureen.
Thank you, Amanda. We're going to talk about project eligibility now and who can apply for CIRA funding. There are 4 types of organizations that are eligible to apply: nonprofits, registered charities, Indigenous communities, and academics from Canadian colleges or universities. This year, you may have noticed, if you've looked at our grants call in previous years, CIRA has expanded the scope of who can apply for a grant. We've broadened it from specific communities. It was once Northern, rural, Indigenous, and students, and we've broadened it to any community working to close a digital divide across Canada. This is allowing us to better reflect the reality that digital inequities exist in every corner of the country, in big cities, small towns, every region and demographic. So that means including urban settings. Our reviewers will be looking for the applications that are effectively closing digital divides in the communities that need it most. So Amanda and I have covered what we do fund, but I'll also touch now on what isn't eligible for funding. There are specific groups that we don't fund. For example, schools, libraries, municipalities, small businesses. We only fund entities that are constituted as a nonprofit, charity, Indigenous community, or university college. It's possible in some cases that libraries may be constituted as a nonprofit, in which case they would be eligible, but it's that nonprofit registration or charity that would need to be included in the application for eligibility. There's also certain activities that we don't fund. First of all, we don't fund projects that focus on delivering an online service, such as building an app, creating an online platform, getting a whole bunch of content together for a website. We don't fund things that are specifically focused on that. They can be an element of your project, but not the focus of your project. We also don't fund end user equipment for individual use, for web design projects or generic IT training. Some other funding restrictions include substantial travel expenses, fundraising, core operations, or retrospective costs for things that you've already purchased. We don't fund marketing research or projects that are focused outside of Canada. We also don't fund project budgets where more than 25% is budgeted for equipment. The one exception to that equipment limitation is obviously infrastructure projects, because that's often the lion's share of the budget may be equipment. However, even in that case, customer premises equipment is not eligible for funding. So that's a long list of don'ts. And now we'll look at projects, examples of projects that we've received that did not pass eligibility requirements, just to give you a sense. They're certainly important projects, but they were rejected because they don't align with CIRA's funding areas or target beneficiaries, or they fall under one of the funding restrictions I just identified. So the first example was presented to us as an infrastructure project, and it was a nonprofit looking to upgrade their financial systems and software. We fund infrastructure around community connectivity, not individual organization-based software and services. So it wasn't eligible. In the next case, a community organization wanted digital support for an online marketplace. And in that case, we don't fund websites or e-commerce. A third example was a charity looking to integrate community water data into an online resource. Because we don't fund online services, it didn't align with our funding areas. It also doesn't specifically link to one of the three funding areas: online safety, policy engagement, or infrastructure. Fourth example is a charity wanting to fund a digital citizenship award for graduating high school students. That is a lovely idea, but it is not something, unless it were connected somehow to online safety training, the focus being the digital citizenship award would not be something that we could consider. So it doesn't align with our funding areas. And finally, we had an academic at a university building a large language module for a language learning module for artificial intelligence. And again, since we don't fund content projects, this didn't align with our funding areas. Now, key dates to keep in mind. The first one is March 18th. Do not forget that date, but let's walk through the application period timeline. So it opened this past Monday on February 2nd, much earlier this year than our usual timing, and it closes earlier this year too, also on March 18th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And we emphasize the time zone in the deadline because we have applicants from across the country and our online system doesn't accept late applications. It automatically closes at the 2 p.m. Eastern deadline. So make sure you know what time that is for you in your time zone, because every year we have people who miss applying because they get the time zones mixed up. So please don't let that happen to you. From February 2nd, so earlier this week, until March 18th, we review applications on an ongoing basis up until that 2 p.m. deadline. That's why the one thing we can't emphasize enough is to get your applications in early. And I think this is something that we do that is pretty unique to CIRA's application program, so hopefully you can take advantage of it. When your application is submitted into our online system, CIRA staff review it to ensure it is eligible and complete, and we will send you a follow-up email right away if anything is missing or incorrect. But we find that probably about half of the applications submitted require some adjustments before they can be accepted. And that's because sometimes it's incorrect documentation or things are missing. There may be sections blank in the application form or issues with the budget. So we want you to get that feedback from us as early as possible so that you can fix your application and resubmit it. If you don't do that, and if you don't respond to our request for revisions before the deadline, unfortunately, your application won't move forward. So we will be sending an email telling you if anything's been missed, and that you have until that 2 p.m. on March 18th to correct it. So watch your inbox for follow-up emails. If your application does pass the eligibility review, so we take a look at it, everything seems in order, it moves on to review by CIRA's grants evaluation panel, and you'll also get an email saying it's moved on. So you'll either get revisions requested or it's moved on. And the evaluation panel does their review during the April to June period. If your project is selected for funding by the grants evaluation panel, you will receive a letter from us in July outlining the requirements for receiving a grant. So for planning purposes, the CIRA funded elements of your project should start no earlier than July. Now we'll talk about how to prepare your submission. A very useful reference for you to take a look at before you even start is the sample application form on our website. Here you'll find all the questions you'll need to answer on the application form, including word counts. And we provide explanations throughout the form to clarify what is being asked of you with each question. Some people use the application form as a guide to draft their responses offline in another document before cutting and pasting into the online application system. And especially if you have a poor internet connection, that might be a good way to approach it. So let's talk about submission requirements. All of what I'm about to say here is on our website, cira.ca/grants, but providing complete documentation is where applicants tend to need the most direction and support. So I'll go over this now. There are several documents required for a full submission. The requirements are the same whether you're a nonprofit, charity, Indigenous community, or academic, with one exception. For academics, the proof of eligibility is slightly different, but in all other respects, the documents required are the same. So if you're a nonprofit, charity, or Indigenous community, for proof of eligibility, you must provide documentation confirming your organization's status, your charitable status if that's relevant, and your incorporation documents otherwise. In addition, your complete submission would include a list of board of directors or your band council with contact information, including organizational affiliation and titles. We also look for a copy of your most recent audited financial statements. That would be for 2024 likely or later. If you do not have audited financial statements, we will accept statements that have been reviewed by an accountant and signed by 2 members of your board. The other thing we look for is a 2026 organizational operating budget. So please ensure that your budget is clearly labeled and indicates the year. An operating budget shows your planned revenue and expenses for your organization's activities for this current calendar year, 2026. We want it to cover January to December 2026 at a minimum. We often get partial budgets from people, and often that's because their fiscal year is not the calendar year, and that's fine. But give us what you have that the budget that you do have, and if you don't have for the balance of 2026, give us your best estimate. Share with us even if it's a draft. It helps us understand how you're thinking about your organization's overall operations. And of course, within the application form, you'll provide us a detailed project plan outlining what you'll be doing and how, which we'll go over in a bit, a detailed project budget, which we'll spend some time on, and 3 letters of support from the community members you expect to benefit from your project. I'll do a quick note right now on Indigenous communities because we're often asked about eligibility documents there. And different applicants have approached the requirement in different ways. Sometimes First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples or their development corporations are incorporated as nonprofits. And in that case, you just provide your nonprofit incorporation documents. In other cases, historical documents like a government treaty have been used, or you may also provide documents from federal or provincial governments recognizing the nation or documentation representing designation as a qualified domain. We understand that proof of eligibility may be different in each case, and we're happy to help answer any questions about that if you have them. If you're an academic researcher applying from a university or college, required documentation is the same as we just went through, except for proof of eligibility. In this case, proof of eligibility includes a letter confirming you're employed by the academic institution and a CV for the lead researcher on the project. Beyond that, requirements are the same as nonprofits, charities, and Indigenous communities. All of these documents are submitted through our online application system, and the materials are the ones that we're checking internally at CIRA for completeness before your application can be moved forward. So given that we often find challenges with some of the applications and submissions, either they're incomplete or they don't have the right documentation, that's where we recommend you get the project in early, because we can help make sure you get the right materials in by the March 18th deadline. Typical mistakes include not providing an operating budget that covers the calendar year, providing letters of support perhaps from people internal to the applicant organization, or like 3 copy-paste letters that are exactly the same, that kind of thing. Those things will not move forward. So that's our advice to you, is take the time now while you have it to get things together that we are looking for. I'll go in depth now on 4 key sections of the application. Those are explaining your digital divide and the beneficiaries, the project plan, the budget, and the community support letters. So first, we want you to tell CIRA about the digital divide that you're dealing with and for whom. And you'll find that under the beneficiaries section. So you have 200 words to define the digital divide you're closing. And what we advise you do is you start by naming the digital divide in everyday terms. What's getting in the way of people using the internet fully and safely in your community or the people that you work with? For an infrastructure project, that it might be that people can't reliably get online, it might be slow, unstable, there may be limited options, or it's too expensive, or there's no local control, or you may have no access at all. So one of the complaints we often hear is students lose connection during online classes, things like that. So describe your divide and tell us how it plays out in real life. For an online safety project, you may have people online, but there are skills or support that they're missing to stay safe from scams, harassment, misinformation, privacy risks, you name it. And for internet policy projects, the community may be affected by internet decisions, but can't easily influence the rules. So maybe it's lack of capacity or access or funding or pathways to participate in policy debates. So for example, Amanda told us about a project where we funded youth to be able to develop their reflexes and skills to sit around the policy table with everybody else. Whichever kind of project you're proposing, we want you in this section to clearly show the before and after. What changes if your project succeeds? So before, you may have had an unstable connection that's preventing access to services. After, you'd be looking to have reliable access for supporting education, healthcare, and local operations. So be as specific as possible. We also want to know who your beneficiaries are, who's going to benefit from your project, how they're affected, and what will change for them. And it really helps if you describe the direct beneficiaries in a way that's clear using real-world roles. For example, high school students in rural Manitoba, people running essential community services, seniors with low literacy, new Canadians seeking employment, or LGBTQ+ activists in downtown Edmonton. And it could be a combination of many different segments of population. So we just want to know, as specific as you know, who your project is meant to serve. And you can quantify it as best you can. So for example, we intend to reach 200 youth through workshops and 10 educators through training, or we'll have 5 learning centers that will have improved connectivity. We notice a lot of applicants include unrealistic estimates of how many people they're going to reach. So the panel wants to know how you arrived at the numbers that you give us for beneficiaries. And we also want to see how your beneficiaries were included in the project development. So try to be as realistic as possible. Not every project is going to reach thousands and thousands of people. So we really want you to think about who's going to directly benefit from your project. The next key part of the application is the project plan, and it's a table in the online application form that you'll fill out that outlines the key activities that you will carry out in order to achieve the goal of your project. A strong plan demonstrates how and when the activities will take place, the expected outputs, and the resources that you need to achieve them. So under key activities, you would identify the main areas of work, events, or milestones for your project, and describe the specific activities that will be undertaken for each. You can be specific and include enough detail to show steps involved in delivering the project. We normally expect to see 3 to 5 key activities. Outputs are the things that are produced as a result of each activity. Outputs should be tangible, and direct products of the activities, like a curriculum, a workshop, a report, or a work plan, or an installed network. We also want to know the timing of the activities, so tell us when the activities will take place, start and finish. Projects should last about 1 year. Human and financial resources is where you identify the resources you need to complete each activity and explain how they relate to the items in your project budget. So be specific about how the grant funding will support each activity and show a clear connection between the resources and project delivery. We've provided example project plans for each funding area that you can download. So please refer to these for guidance and examples preparing your project plan. So some quick tips. We recommend 3 to 5 activities and their outputs. We expect detail. Your project plan should clearly demonstrate to the evaluation panel how you will get the work done. And we want you to be realistic in what you commit to, as you will be required to report on all these key activities if you're funded. Plan on starting the CIRA funded aspects of your project no earlier than July. The project budget, my favorite, is another important part of the application. It's a very interesting place to go to see the story of your project in dollars and cents. So we expect you to enter project revenues and expenses into a budget table. Total revenues must match total expenses. And if they don't match, the system will prompt you to correct the error. So we ask you to show the specific line items for which you are requesting funding from CIRA, as in many cases, you may have other funders also contributing to the overall project budget. The financial request from CIRA should be in line with your organization's size and capacity, and that will be assessed from your financial statements and current operating budget by the evaluation panel. So please be realistic about the amount you are requesting from us and the scope of your project. The application form provides a space where you can upload estimates and quotes for equipment or items to be purchased. And we recommend including these where possible. Because the evaluation panel reviews the applications, they want to see how you arrived at your expenses. Please also show any in-kind revenue or expenses, as well as funding contributions from other sources if they are required to complete your project. If your project is $100,000 and you're asking CIRA for $50,000, we want to know where you expect the other $50,000 is going to come from. You can optionally allocate up to 15% of your grant request towards administration support, which means the overhead costs of delivering the project. And like the project plan, we have provided sample budgets for each funding area so that you can download them, and they may help guide you in putting together your budget for the proposal. Here's some tips for a successful budget. Bear in mind that lump sums won't be accepted. So if you say $50,000 for equipment, that is not going to fly. You have to break everything down. Break your expenses down by cost per item. The evaluation panel wants to see specific costs and how you arrived at those numbers. And as I mentioned, quotes and estimates can be uploaded into the system. And that you may be also asked to provide these later if we need that information following up. Because our panel is keen to understand how exactly you got the numbers that you put together. If your total project budget is greater than the amount being requested from CIRA, please show the other sources of funding you are seeking or have already confirmed. And please ensure you reflect the value of any in-kind contributions from within your organization's revenue and expenses. Staffing costs directly related to project delivery are allowed. For example, if a policy director is spending 60% of her time on the project for 12 months, you can include the 60% of her salary as a line item. So people that are directly involved in key activity delivery should be shown in the budget if you would like funding for that. We ask you to identify any known third-party contractors you intend to work with if your project is funded. For example, with infrastructure projects, if there are businesses or firms you intend to work with to install connectivity, please identify who they are. Or if you're outsourcing major pieces of work beyond your organization, please identify who you intend to work with if you will. This will help the evaluation panel understand and assess your project. Now on to the 15% for administration support, which is optional, but if you're requesting $100,000 from CIRA, for example, the amount of administration support would be up to $15,000. In that case, the rest of your CIRA-related expenses would total to $85,000. And this admin support is optional. You can request a partial amount or not request it at all. Some applicants choose to prioritize requesting funding for direct project delivery expenses because they may already have funding that they use for admin. So it's really up to you, maximum of 15%. If you do choose to budget it, administration support comprises overhead things such as rent, utilities, managerial oversight, accounting, insurance. Again, be specific and provide a breakdown of the costs you expect it to apply to. And finally, as we mentioned, each application is required to include at least 3 letters of community support. If there's one thing you should start on right away today, if you're planning to apply, it's getting those letters from people because they take a bit of effort and time. We ask for these letters because they are meant to demonstrate that you are engaged with the community partners or the participants who will benefit from the project. We're looking for what is the story behind why a grant is needed. What needs were articulated by the people your project will serve that encouraged you to develop the project. These letters show us you have developed relationships in the community that will help the project succeed. Letters from people associated with your organization, like staff or board members, don't qualify and will not be accepted. We have provided some example support letters that you can download to give you an idea of what we expect. Here are some of the examples that we've seen in previous years. So one was a letter from a partner organization providing support, installing and delivering wireless access in a remote college campus. We also have Band Council resolution approving of and supporting the initiative to expand connectivity in an Indigenous community. Or it could be a letter from a school board that will benefit from an online safety educational program for elementary school students. Or it could be a letter from an Indigenous literacy organization that will co-develop online safety training materials for teachers of Indigenous students. All sorts of different kinds of letters will be eligible. They need to be unique and not from within your own organization. So now that we've gone over the types of projects we fund, who can apply, and the materials you'll need to include in your application, you can take this moment to consider quick reality check before you start the work of applying for a CIRA Net Good Grant. These are the questions that you can ask yourself. Am I applying on behalf of a nonprofit, charity, Indigenous community, or a university or college as an academic? Does my project fall into one of the 3 funding areas, infrastructure, online safety, or policy engagement? Does my project work to close a digital divide within Canada? Are we able to describe the divide and how the project will help to close it for our community? And of course, the required documents that include your organization or community's incorporation documents, financial statements, operating budget, board or band council list, letters of support, as well as the project plan and budget, are these things that you can realistically get together and have access to over the next few weeks. If you answer yes to those questions, we are interested in seeing your project. Now I will hand over to Amanda to take you through our online portal.
Thank you, Maureen. So now that you know everything about putting your application together, we're just going to give you a quick overview of how to use our application submission portal so that you know exactly where to put the information and how to get it submitted. You will submit your application in our online grant system, Smart Simple. To get started, you access it at cira.smartsimple.ca. You can go directly to the site address, or we have it linked all over our website if you go to cira.ca. You may choose your preferred language from the dropdown and then click register to sign up. Our application platform is available in both official languages, English and French. When you register for an account, you'll choose the applicable organization and provide the required information, including your organization and contact details. So this will be a quick check right away that you are one of the eligible organizations who can apply. If you're applying as a registered charity, You can search for your organization's information using your charitable registration number, and it'll auto-populate. After completing registration, you will receive a welcome email inviting you to set up your password. Once your password's set, you're ready to log in and start your grant application. So this is the page that you'll see once you log in after resetting your password. It's called our applicant portal. Here you can click on your organization profile to view and update any information related to it, or you can click Apply Now to start your grant application. You'll see two things on your dashboards, action items and completed items. Applications that are drafts or require revisions will be found under action items, and submitted applications will be found under completed items. To start your application, you'll click Apply Now. And on the next page, you'll click on Complete Your Application form to start filling out your application. Our cycle is now open. The application form consists of a series of sections organized into 7 tabs. You may complete the sections in any order. One important tip is as soon as you open up your application form, hit Save Draft before you put anything in. It's going to activate some functions of the application that are not available until after you hit Save, such as uploading any additional documents like your budget or your articles of incorporation. This button, the Save Draft button, will be your best friend while you're filling out the application form. We recommend hitting it as frequently as possible because there's nothing worse than something going wrong and losing a bunch of information when you've already sat and applied for an hour. Save Draft. The most important step is going to come once you've completed all 7 sections. You're going to hit the big red submit button at the bottom to ensure that your application reaches CIRA before 2 p.m. Eastern time on March 18th. Really important to go in and double check your application to make sure that you have hit submit when you finish and not just save draft. We will not be able to receive any applications after 2 p.m. Eastern time on March 18th. If you've missed any of the questions when you're hitting submit, you'll get an error message telling you that you need to go back and fill it in. So you can't hit it by accident. Don't worry about that. If you do hit submit and you realize afterwards that there's something that you wanted to change, please just send us an email and we can reopen your application so that you can go back in and edit it. But again, if you don't submit early enough for there to be time for that, then we won't be able to. So before March 18th at 2 p.m. Awesome. So what happens after an application is submitted and it goes on to the review process? So once you've submitted application, you will receive an automatic email confirming that it was received. However, that does not mean that your project is eligible. It just means that it was received by our system. There are 2 phases of review once you've submitted. The first step is the internal review. CIRA staff will review the application for completeness and eligibility and follow up within 2 days requesting any additional information. We'll usually even follow up sooner than that. At least half of the applications have needed some kind of follow-up, like errors in the budget or incomplete or incorrect documentation. So we will get back to you if any corrections are needed. Please be on the lookout for follow-up emails that may get caught in spam filters. And it is your responsibility to make sure that any corrections to your application before the deadline on March 18th, After the deadline, applications are not accepted. The evaluation panel will be evaluating projects using these 5 criteria: project plan, beneficiaries, community support, outcomes, and budget. Each application is given a score out of 100, and as you can see, the project plan is worth the most points. We can't predict for sure what will happen in any given year, but we usually receive over 100 eligible applications each year. And due to this high demand and our limited funding, we are normally only able to fund about 15 to 20% of the projects submitted. So that's why it's key to make sure that your project aligns with these criteria for the best chance of receiving funding. If your application was moved forward for review by the evaluation panel, you will hear the results from CIRA in July. I'm going to throw it back over to Maureen to talk about some mistakes to avoid.
Yep. We have given you a mountain of information here in this webinar, and there's another mountain of information on our website for you to refer to. So we are pretty sure you're not going to make these mistakes because we've gone through them all during this webinar. But just in case you had to step away, here's a quick summary of common mistakes applicants make. And all of these will result in your application being sent back for corrections or it not being funded at all. So for the best chances of receiving funding, make sure you're not doing any of the following. The first one is not checking alignment. That is probably the #1 reason that projects end up being ineligible for funding. So make sure your project aligns with our funding areas. And if you're unsure, spend some time on our website to get to know the types of projects we fund in the 3 funding areas. You can also send us a note at grants@cira.ca with a brief description of your project, and we can give you some advice. The next reason is insufficient and unrealistic project plan. We want to see a plan that has sufficient detail and that scope of your project is in line with the capacity of your organization to achieve realistic goals. We have very experienced people on our evaluation panel who know how to look for good projects and they know what to look for. So make sure you show them everything you can. It's important also to show community involvement in your project, and you must provide those 3 letters of community support from the people who will benefit from your project, not from your staff or board members. Filling out your budget correctly, including specific breakdowns of costs and providing quotes and estimates is super important. And I'll say this is probably the biggest one. Don't forget to check your email and check your spam or junk folder so that you don't miss any emails from us and from the Smart Simple system. When we find issues to correct in an application, you will get the email from the application system. And because it's system generated, it may get caught by spam filters. So please keep an eye out on the day you submit or within the next day or 2 to see what we have to say back to you, whether it's moved on or whether we're requesting revisions. And finally, what is probably the most important takeaway, you've heard this before, apply early. We love to give the opportunity to check through your application and reach out to you if there are any issues. And so use the time now because you do have until 2 p.m. on March 18th to resubmit. Do yourself a favor, start preparing your application now, get your community support letters, don't wait till the last minute. And also because our whole application process is a little earlier this year, it kind of might hit into anybody who has March break plans. So February is an awesome time to get things done. That's our advice to you. And we wish you all really good luck putting this together. We will remind you that the best way to reach us with any questions is grants@cira.ca. You can feel free to let us take a look at a summary of your project and we will give advice if you have any questions. And one thing to keep in mind is that CIRA staff, the people that are talking to you now and the ones that are helping us with the eligibility review, we're just to do that very thing. We don't have influence over which projects get funded. That's up to our grants evaluation panel that makes that final recommendation to CIRA's board of directors in June. So thank you very much for putting up with all of this information, hoping it's useful to you. And we now have a bit of time to answer any questions you may have. We will put our cameras back on, I believe. Is that so?
All right. Thank you, Maureen. I'm just going to read out a few of the questions in here. What is the maximum amount of funding that one can apply for?
Maximum amount of funding up to $100,000. It's also okay to apply for less if your project doesn't need that much.
If we don't have any annual financial reports that have been audited, what are we able to submit instead?
Keep in mind that having audited financial statements is something that helps our panel know the financial and operational track record of your organization. So they are important. A lot of smaller or new organizations may not have them yet. So we tell you to provide us with financial statements that have been reviewed by an accountant and signed by 2 of your board members. That's the alternative.
Would a local out-of-pocket transportation cost for community members or individuals who are participating in programs be covered as something that you could put through?
Absolutely. You can certainly include costs of engaging the community in your project if that is something that you think is required in your community. That, yeah, as long as it's not the entirety of the project. I think often people will put in for honorariums or for transportation costs or costs just for people to be able to attend. So that's something that we are happy to consider.
For the initial review, do you review all applications equally after the deadline, or is there any advantage besides feedback to applying early?
You got it. The advantage to applying early is feedback. After that, they all go through the exact same process. So the timing of it doesn't matter. They get looked at as one big heap of lovely applications.
If we're submitting additional documents like presentations or reports that we have in French, would they need to be translated to English?
You are welcome to apply entirely in French. Then we take care of translation at our end if it's needed.
If the fiscal year for budgets or audited financial statements is ending in the middle of 2026, what would you recommend doing?
This is the case for lots of people, so this is a good question. What we ask people to do is provide us what they do have the committed budget for. So whether that's the board that's approved, like your approved budget for as long as you have it. And then we ask for you to produce a draft that covers the balance of the year. It may be a whole other year. We don't necessarily, we know that that's sometimes a bit of an awkward thing to do in an organization because you haven't got it all planned out or approved, but it gives us a sense that you know where what your organization's plans are for an entire year before we end up deciding whether we fund your project. So do your best with that requirement. It's not an easy one for people sometimes, but when your fiscal year ends on a current operating budget during the calendar year, we would appreciate if you can do a kind of an estimate of the next year's budget and submit that.
Can a project that involves students from schools qualify, even though you've stated that schools themselves are not eligible?
Yes, because the entity applying, as long as they fit into the nonprofit, registered charity, Indigenous community, or actual, post-secondary school would fit. So it has to, your first step is figuring out what is the entity that's applying. And if it's an entity like a club that's incorporated, you can do that.
You mentioned that this year's call opened earlier than usual. Should applicants expect a similar timeline in the future, or was this a one-time adjustment?
Good question. We expect that it will continue to be earlier. So the time frame that we've got going now, the February to March kind of time frame.
Would professional development and training and curriculum resources for teachers qualify?
We would love it if you could elaborate that a little bit more in an email to grants@cira.ca, because we need a bit more context about that. So yes, drop us a line with a paragraph about what exactly that would consist of and who it's for and what it would be about.
For applicants considering the online safety focus area, are there any reoccurring gaps or misconceptions you often see that people could avoid when preparing submissions?
Well, I think in the specific funding area of online safety, we have experienced that is the most applied to area. And we have funded an awful lot of projects in online safety, and they're all important and they're all making a really significant difference in people's ability to use the internet safely. But we ask that people take a look at the ones that we've already funded so that you can really show us what is unique and different about what you're planning to do. Because when we have to choose, when the panel has to choose among so many projects, they're going to look for the ones that are doing something new and different than what we've already funded. So that would be my advice there.
If a project proposal could be interpreted as similar to one that's already been funded but has some clear differences, do you require a detailed analysis to demonstrate the difference, or how would you like projects to share their differences?
I think we'll leave that up to you, and you can take a look at what we have funded and describe those differences. And if they stand out as unique, I'm sure that the panel will be able to see that. So we don't have any specific advice on that unless you want to when we're doing the eligibility review as staff, we wouldn't get into that level of analysis. That's more something that if you want to run it by us early on, we're happy to take a look and see. But ultimately, that would be down to the panel to decide.
Would you accept grant applications that have multiple components? So think Wi-Fi upgrades and a cyber safety workshop.
Yes, because we also know that when you bring connectivity into a community, especially if it's maybe the first time or in a bigger way, online safety issues and cybersecurity are immediately issues that come right with it. So often people will maybe present the project as mainly an infrastructure project, but with online safety or cybersecurity components, and that's totally fine. There can be overlap between the types of projects. We don't say you can only do one because we understand it's all connected.
Perfect. Can we submit for multiple projects and communities in 1 year?
You can only have one application per entity that's applying. So if your project is able to reach a number of communities through that one entity, but you couldn't do multiple applications. So you do what you can. Like if your project is able to hit 3 different communities with the funding and carry out activities in 3 different communities, that's totally fine. But there would be one entity that's leading all of that. So I don't know if that answered your question.
For infrastructure projects, do they have to be big community projects?
Infrastructure is always a big undertaking, but infrastructure to us can also mean things like laptop lending or wireless hotspots, those kinds of things. So there are different scales of it. In the case of trying to put in fiber or different kinds of solutions, every infrastructure project is unique, and some of them are huge, and $100,000 is a drop in the bucket, but it's still an important drop in the bucket. So it really depends on the scale. I think what the panel looks for is how impactful is the project going to be, even if it's for a small number of people, if that's kind of what you're getting at. If there's no access there right now and suddenly you're bringing access, amazing. So those are the kinds of considerations that go into deciding who gets the funding.
Can the online safety component target specific communities or specific themes, or does it need to be broad?
Specific is better. The more specific you can be is the best, because that will also make it unique for when the panel is considering a lot of online safety projects against each other.
Are projects with partially secured funding prioritized over projects without secured funding?
Not necessarily, but they'll be looking at the whole project and the likelihood of success. And if a project is under careful consideration by the panel, it's possible that we would reach out to find out. So you said you might be getting funding from X. Has that happened yet? Because there's a few months that pass between when you submit the project and when final decisions are being made. So it's helpful to identify where there are sources of additional funding. For the panel, that shows engagement, it shows interest, and but you also want to be realistic. Like you shouldn't be promising if you don't think it's actually something that's going to happen. So it's a balancing act. There are many projects that have been funded where there's only CIRA as a funder, and there are many projects where CIRA has been one of the funders of many.
Would you consider clients to be the primary beneficiaries of a publicly led project? I got an example if you need to.
Sure.
So, if you're looking to provide internet access to the individuals that attend a nonprofit organization, for example, serving newcomers, providing internet to them under the project, would they be considered the primary beneficiaries?
I think so, yes. And I think if that is not a good enough answer, feel free to email us at grants@cira.ca with a little bit more of a description, and we could give you a little bit more of a clear answer. I am noting that there's 2 minutes left. So Amanda, you can let me know when we're going to wrap up the questions, and also that any questions we don't get to, we will follow up after this webinar.
Yes, I was going to say there's a few questions here that I haven't read out because they're very project or organization specific. So what we'd ask is that you shoot us an email. You can elaborate a little bit. You can say exactly what you've asked in your question here, and we'll be able to give you more detailed and individualized answers and support. But that would be the rest of our questions. We're all good.
Okay, perfect. Really appreciate the level of engagement from everybody. That's awesome. And hope we have answered your questions and inspired you to put an application into CIRA's Net Good Grants this year. We are here to help. We're here to help you make it through to the finish line. What do you think the one thing we're going to tell you is right now? Apply early, and then we can help you more. So thanks so much, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And just to answer that one last question there, the email is grants@cira.ca.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.